Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Boys. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we start off with the whole Butcher situation. Obviously, him dealing with the Becca thing. And I think this is actually kind of an interesting thing. Like, if you look at almost like Butcher's story almost plays out a little bit like Huey, because Huey just basically kind of gave up partway through this. Because of everything that went down, and we see Butcher do that. He starts shit at a rock show or something, and just so he can get the crap beat out of him, because it's just that thing of like, I'm so miserable. I need to punch something. I need to be hurt. I need to feel anything, whether it's just anger, just because he can't take it. Like, it's just a situation where he can't necessarily take anything out on anyone else, because it's like Becca doesn't want to be with him because of who I am, And so obviously, he's in, and once again, this is something I never take notice of, but I notice it more in this. It's like, you always gotta pay attention to the fact that so much in this universe is built around Vought, because there's even like Vought Farm, like the brand is super fucking strong. It's like every time, because like obviously they even talk about it like basically there's a Vought version of Spotify. It's like Voughtify or whatever. It's like stuff like that. It's like you notice it more and more, but it's like, man, it's just I mean, this is a massive international conglomerate. This is the bee's knees when it comes to just like being the top of the top. So it's like, it makes sense that you just have your hands all over the place. I mean, you're branded with having like, oh, we have superheroes, so it's like, it's going to put you at the top, considering what superheroes mean. Just obviously the parallels between the real world, because superheroes are just the bee's knees and everything. But now it's like, even more so in this world, because they're real. But regardless, he calls up, Huey. He finally answers Huey's call, and he was like, okay, so we want to tell you Stormfront is actually Liberty. And, it's like, and I like that thing from Huey being like, I'm not mad at you. He's like, why would you be mad at me? He's like, I get it. He's like, it's Becca, so he's like, I completely understand. But for him, it's like, at the very, like, you're kind of leaving us high and dry, but he's like, I get it. It's Becca. She's your world. You thought she was dead. Because for him, he's like, he even said to himself, like, if I was in your situation, if it was Robin, I'm sure, he would do that in a heartbeat. So he understands, it's like, you thought someone you love was dead, and just be able to see them, to be with them again, you'd give anything for it, And Huey understands that. He's just like, I wish you would have said goodbye, And it's like, and then and I like what Butcher said. He's like, you were my canary. And then like, even Huey's like, I don't get that. But then Huey brings it up to Mother's Milk, and it's like, yeah, he said that I was his canary. And then Mother's Milk was like, so tell me exactly what he said, because he knew what that meant, because what he told Butcher, what Huey meant. It's like, my canary to tell me when I've gone too far. And it's like, shit, Butcher's about to do something crazy. So well, since we're on, let's keep going down that trail of things with Butcher. I think is kind of an interesting aspect in this episode was like, obviously he goes and meets with his Aunt Judy. We learned a tiny bit about his family, because it's like, oh, your mom and dad are worried about you. It's like, your dad's cancer's getting worse, and he's like, yeah, go ahead, I don't care. So it's like, okay, so he has a very tumultuous relationship with his dad, to the point he's basically like, oh yeah, like that cancer can't eat him alive soon enough. It's like, Jesus, so like there's bad blood there. For what reasons? I don't know. So when they pointed it out, it's kind of neat that like, obviously in season 1 we learned a little bit, but now like we are definitely learning a lot more about each one of the boys, this season. And so to learn that about him, obviously he has his little dog Tara, which is like, honestly, it's kind of adorable when him and Tara are walking down the street. I'm like, that's actually kind of adorable. But he had that pig. I was like, immediately my brain was like, is that his like sex pig? And it turns out it is, because later on Judy's like, yeah, that's his fuck pig. He's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, Tara fucks that. And it's like, I thought that's what it was. I was like, maybe I was reading too much. Maybe I'm thinking too much. It's like, no, turns out I was right. But obviously, like, Huey and Mother's Milk show up there, and he was just kind of like, because for him, and I thought this was a powerful moment of why this hits Butcher so hard, because he's like, literally, what was everything I did for? I mean, once again, it's like, it's that thing of like, almost like Huey was kind of at that point too, because he was just exhausted, like everything, boom, 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 hitting you. I mean, it's a different thing, but it's also similar, because they just both kind of given up. Like, someone had kind of described it perfectly, like, basically, Huey has PTSD, and it's just like, finally, just everything's hitting him, all at once. And so he was just kind of giving up. And now for Butcher, it's like he's dedicated years to this. He thought, he would never knew what happened to Becca. He thought he was hopeful that she was alive. He went so many years never knowing what happened to her. And then, and dedicated so much of that time for revenge, taking down the Supes, Bot, and everything. That was his everything. It's like without Becca, it's like he lasered in on revenge. That's all he had to him, and for that to be taken away from him, at the very least, it was replaced by like, oh my God, Becca's alive. I have something else to fight for. But now it's like Becca's gone. It's like, what do I fight for? Like, it's like I need a fight because it's like, what else do I have left to hold on to? Because Becca was kind of my, I'm using Flash terms here, but lightning rod. And it's like without that to hold on to, grasp onto, it's kind of blowing in the wind, in the storm, So I know that kind of effed up that metaphor, but you get what I'm trying to say. So it's kind of interesting to see him kind of lost, but even when he's lost, who's there? Huey and Mother's Milk. And I think it's very interesting. I think it's very important that it's those two specifically, not even the entire team, because obviously Frenchie and Kimiko are on their own thing. We'll get to that soon enough. But I think because I think probably out of anyone in the group, it seems like, and this is just me throwing it out there, it seems like Mother's Milk knows the most about it. Because also, he seems like the only one that's willing to stand up. Like amongst the boys, he's not one to take Butcher's bullshit too much. It's just kind of like, because even later on, like when he's trying to get Huey out of the way, he's like, you can move Huey, but it's not going to be that easy to move me. And it's like, so like there's something there. And even Butcher, it almost seemed like, I think it's a thing of even Butcher's like, that's probably like too much trouble because he doesn't really, he didn't try or anything, but still, obviously Butcher was going to leave and everything, but Black Noir's outside is like, well, shit. What do we do? Well, we got to hunker down. It's like, yeah, because obviously, Butcher didn't want to talk about it too much, but he's like, Becca's not coming. And eventually he talks about it of like how she didn't want to come. She didn't want me. And obviously Huey was talking about and I thought it was interesting because Huey says it himself, was like, oh, boo-hoo, you have no one and nothing. Join the club, you're nothing special. We're all literally in that situation. We've literally all lost everything. Mother's Milk doesn't have his wife, he doesn't have his child. I don't have Starlight. I don't have Robin. I don't have my revenge. You don't have Becca. At the very least, she's still alive, Because, yeah, she might not want you, but at least she's still alive, and that's something. Don't act like, but on top of that, it's like, don't act like it's completely nothing, And I obviously ticked Butcher off because it's just kind of like, don't talk like you know my situation. Like I said, everyone's got their own shit to deal with in this situation, but it's like, all right, MM had called, reported like a gas leak in the neighborhood or whatever, because it's like Black Noir's not going to go on a killing spree when there's a whole bunch of witnesses around. So I thought that was kind of, interesting in that regard. So it's like, all right, because we've seen that, because obviously for them, their reputation means everything. They're supposed to be superheroes. It's like, whoa. Even if these are bad guys, publicly executing people, it's not gonna look good for your image. So it's like, no. Which that statement, funny enough, funny in an effed up way, plays out, plays a role in this episode. But like I said, we'll get to that eventually down the road. But the fact of the matter is, we also find out that Judy's a dealer, because it's just like they go down there and it's like, oh, she's making all these drugs and stuff, and then Huey's almost looking like, wait, what? And also, what was neat was like earlier on, Judy was like, oh my God, doesn't Huey look like the spitting image of Lenny? And it's like, who the hell is Lenny? Like, we're not doing, it's like, no, he doesn't. So it's like, okay. So now we're getting into the reason why Huey is actually important to Butcher, whether he says it or not, why it seems like he's like, because Huey reminds him of someone. And actually later on, Huey asked Lenny about it. She's like, I shouldn't do it, without Billy's permission. Actually, fuck Billy. And she's like, Lenny was his little brother. It's like a lot like you, kind of just a skinny kid. And one day, like in 4th grade, some dude broke his nose. Butcher went ape shit, like took the seesaw and was like going to bash the dude in. No one could get Billy off of him until Lenny just kind of pulled him away. So it's like, it seems like Lenny, and this is what Huey kind of represents, is able to calm that storm. Once again, what Mother's Milk meant about you being his, his canary. And now, in retrospect, this adds more context to what Becca was bringing up last episode. She basically was saying, like, you were already kind of messed up to begin with. Like, whether it was me or not, you were always one day away from having a bad day. Like, there's something inside of Butcher. Like, obviously, he's kind of had that, like, that rage. But I think that rage is because he's a very protective person. I think probably, like, maybe this has something to do with their upbringing, why he hates his dad so much. Doesn't seem like he has as much venom for his mom. It just seems mainly towards his dad. Like I said, the whole let the cancer eat him or whatever, can't get to him soon enough. But it's like, and now, it's like, what happened to his brother? We never found out, but it's like, it seems like this is the catalyst that probably built a lot of rage inside of Butcher. And the fact of the matter is, I think Becca was able to be that calming storm. So it's interesting, like, almost how Huey and Butcher are almost like, because even Butcher threw it at Huey like, oh, all you do is lump onto people. You lumped onto Robin, you lumped onto Starlight, and you're trying to lump onto me. He's like, I'm not interested. But it's interesting because it seems like Billy kind of does the same thing. So it's like there's almost like a mirror image situation. I mean, maybe that's why for one, not only does he see his brother, Lenny, he also sees himself, And I think that's so interesting because it's like, who did you latch on to? Like, it seems like you latched on to Becca to be your storm, the storm inside of you, your rage and everything. But obviously that's going, and now it seems like you're leaning on Huey. So it's almost like you're doing the same thing too. It's like both of you need this. Like, you complement each other in that regard. You both kind of need each other. Like, you both kind of fill that void to a certain extent. I just thought that was fascinating. But then we got Black Noir getting into the house. One bomb after the next, and then like every time the explosions happen, you hear more footsteps. You're like, is he dodging these, or is he just taking? Because we saw before that he took some explosions before in like the first episode of the season, and he kept trucking along. So I don't know whether he has like crazy healing abilities or whether it's just like, I say that, but it might just simply be the fact is he doesn't feel pain. That could be like part of his superpower. What was interesting though is it's like, oh, we could get to the car, but Mother's Train was like, he's faster than a car. I'm like, once again, we haven't seen the full scale of what he's capable of. It seems like it's hard to say what he's fully capable of because it seems like he's got superhuman strength. It doesn't seem like because he's not full-blown bulletproof because he can get hurt. It just doesn't stop him. So that's why I think he can't feel pain. And on top, like, it seems like he's basically a superhuman. It seems like they're kind of aiming him to be almost a little bit of a Captain America. Like, with probably dull nerves so he can't feel anything. Because that's also like a medical condition that makes it so you can't, like, it's a rare medical condition where you actually can't feel pain. And obviously the dangers of that, because I won't get into it, but obviously, But I think that's probably what it is. He's supposed to be kind of like Captain America, so like super enhanced. He can run, he can like, I'm sure the parallels you could probably make is like a cross between Captain America and Black Panther, because I'm sure that kind of goes a little hand in hand, because obviously they, character-wise, they're kind of similar abilities-wise, so it seems like that's it. But obviously, Billy's just kind of like, all right, getting the others out of there. It's like, get them out of here. I'll handle this myself. He's like, you want me? Come and get me. And you see Black Noir, all the shrapnel is inside of him, but it's like, it didn't stop him. So gunshots, doesn't stop him. Huey and Mother's Milk bust in there. Like, Mother's Milk was shooting at him, didn't do anything, got a knife thrown at him. Huey's shooting at him. Black Noir takes a gunshot to the hand, just still keeps going. And it's like in that moment seeing, and once again, and it's like the parallel that they set that story up of like Huey on the ground, Black Noir over him. You see like Billy's like protective, like that mother bird instincts kind of kicking in. Well, Mama Lion, I guess, would be probably the better way to rephrase that. But the fact is, he kicks in and he's like, hey, you killed them. I'm going to let all the secrets out. About, like, the fact of the matter is about what Homelander being the rapist bastard that he is. The fact of the matter is he has a son and everything, and Vought wouldn't want all that plastered out there. And part of me wonders, because I was wondering myself, like, why is Noir out of anyone? Because no one else in the Seven is really going after them like that. But why was it Noir? I was like, was this a personal mission? It seems like, no, Edgar sent him. It's like, I think Edgar sees Black Noir as this the guy you send to get shit done. So he seems like, once again, as Homelander says, it's like, don't worry, except for you, Black Noir, you're doing great. Because it seems like he's the only one because he's the only one we haven't really dived into, because we know nothing about him, but it's like, he's the only one that doesn't have, like, drama. Like, the only thing we came about this was, like, when he was breaking down when the whole Vought thing came out about Compound V. But it's just, like, in that moment, regardless of everything, he was still going to choke Butcher. So I'm wondering, does Black Noir know more than anyone knows? So does he already, maybe he knows about Stormfront, maybe he already knows about Homelander's situation, like, maybe what Billy was saying was, like, the first time he heard all that, but regardless, it's like, oh, you're running your mouth, like, I could just snap your neck, but it's like, nope, Edgar put him down, and it's like, well, how do I know you have photos? He's like, are you willing to take that chance? So he calls Black Noir out, off, and he was like, do you actually have the photos? And he's like, yeah, of course I do, and it's like smirking, and it's like, no, he doesn't, but, so that lends itself to a very interesting situation, though, because it's kind of a stalemate. It's like, all right, we can't go after them, because if we do, there's a chance all that stuff about Homelander's kid, we don't want that, because especially if because for one, if Homelander if that becomes public and stuff like that, it'd probably be a little harder to rein Homelander in. Also, like, if, the truth comes out about it, it jeopardizes everything that they've built too. Like, they are in the process of repairing their image after the whole Compound V thing, which seems like they successfully have. Still kind of a thing of like, well, we don't want to rock the boat too much. Like, we don't want to kind of this turn into the PR nightmare that it potentially could be. So that's all going down. So obviously, Billy telling Terror, it's like, no, I'll get your mom back. He's like, I'm going to do it somehow, so he hasn't completely, like, he's like, yeah, I was going to basically lay down and die like a bleeding, twat. He's like, but, I'm going to get your mom back. And gives Terror the doll of Homelander. He's like, Terror, fuck it. And we hear him going to town on it. So it just seems like that spark is kind of revived in Butcher, so I'm interested to see where things kind of go on that front. Then on, like, the Kimiko and Frenchie front, there's that whole thing of, like, obviously Frenchie's following her. She goes into some place. There's some people talking about, what were they, they were talking about Hamilton, and I like that the guy's like, because he was like, no, like, the fact is that you had, Lin-Manuel Miranda playing Hamilton is supposed to be a commentary on what it's like to be an immigrant in America. And he's like, they're having a whole diatribe about that. And then they reference something else that I can't remember. Then Kimiko runs in there. Home dude's back's turned to her, grabs it. I was like, what's she about to do? She grabs, like, near his ear, rips half his face. I was like, ugh. I was like, no. I was like, that was, okay, at first I was like, what the hell is this about? Then proceeds to murder everyone, broke the other dude's arm, snapped his neck. Other dude got his pistol shoved in his eye, and it's like, Frenchie comes in there and like, holy shit. So he follows her to her church. I'm like, what's this all about? And it's like, oh, so Kimiko's turned into a hitman. The fact is, Cherry is offering, he's like, whoa, you hired her to, he's like, no, the Albanians hired her to do that. I'm just getting a 10% cut of it, which obviously for Frenchie, it's like, screw you for doing that. Because it's like, we had this whole moment last episode. How I'm trying to help the whole Kimiko situation. I opened up to you about it, and it's because it almost seems like Sherry's because it's like, for him, it's like, oh, how much of a vulnerable situation she's in and a vulnerable spot she's in, and you're trying to take advantage of that, and it's like, yeah, I told you before, she's not a helpless kitten that needs your saving, but Frenchie was like, don't do this, like, I get it, like, how is this going to help, with getting revenge against Stormfront? It's like, this isn't the way, but obviously for Kimiko, she's like, because he's like, I get that you feel responsible. He's like, I know, like, he hasn't opened up to her about it, but it's like, I know, because even Sherry brought it up last episode. He knows what it's like to feel guilt over someone being dead and it being your fault. The whole lamplighter situation and Grace's grandkids, like, he understands that. So, but it's just, and I think it's interesting because obviously it's both, this is me thinking too much about it, but it's like, it's a literal and metaphorical, them not being able to speak, them not being able to talk. It's like the lack of communication, not being able to understand each other in both a literal and metaphorical sense, because because she's saying, like, it is my fault, stop trying to save me, I don't need to be saved. He's like, I don't understand you because you won't teach me the language. And he was basically like, fuck you, fuck off, fuck you. And he's like, you want to be a monster? Go be a monster, so, because I think for her, it's just like, because I think, I like I said, I took it last episode as when she was in front of Stormfront, she was filled with rage, but I think she's scared because, like, well, she wouldn't get up against Stormfront, she couldn't beat her. Like, at least, and that was her and her brother working together. They couldn't talk, maybe things would be different, but it's like, I think there's a part of her that's like, that, she has a little bit of PTSD herself, of like, because when she's in front of Stormfront, I think it makes her freeze, because she's like, no, my brother. It makes her think back to her killing her brother. And so I think she just, much like Butcher, she just needs an outlet. She needs something. She needs to kill. She needs to do something. She needs to kind of do something with all that anger, that sadness, that rage, and this is her outlet. So I'm curious to kind of see what that means for her and Frenchie in the future. On the VOD side of things, we have that movie and everything. And the moment things are playing out and it's like, okay, you can see how things are going. Like with the whole Maeve situation, you're like, okay, so they're trying to play up the whole, like, her being gay and everything. And then, like, she goes behind camera and, it's like, oh my God, Maeve, that was great. That was awesome. But then you have Homelander being like, oh, can we play that again? She's like, okay, are you done? He's like, what? She's like, if I promise I won't see Elena anymore, will you stop this? He's like, well, why? Why would you do it? He's like, you're in love. It's like, I would never do that. That's so mean and messed up. It's like, because he's so about it. It's like, you're so blatant about what you're doing, but you're trying to pretend like, what? Why am I messing with you? What are you talking about? I'm just trying to be there to support you, Maeve. And it's like, once again, it's like, but that's the thing of like, why are you so invested in her? Because, and someone else had said it's because Maeve is his. It's like, she already made that clear when she told Elena that story earlier in this season, but it's like, you're mine? I don't care if we're not together. Like, I don't know whether it's a situation of like, is it because it's a woman? Is it because she's just with someone in general? Is it literally both at once? It's just kind of like, no. Or is it because I'm unhappy? I don't have the person I cared about, that being, Madeline. It's like, I don't have her, so you don't get to be happy either. So is it kind of, out of spite? Who knows? Then there's also the Ashley situation. And someone else had put this so perfectly. You feel it. Every time Homelander's in a scene with somebody and just that look on his face, you're like scared. Every time Ashley's in the scene with Homelander, I'm scared. I was tensing up. I was like, oh my God, is he just going to randomly kill her right now? Granted, he's not going to do it in front of other people, but still, it's just kind of, I'm scared. I'm scared for her because she's stammering. She's scared herself because she's like, she knows like, oh, Homelander's a psychopath. Once again, it's like the Madeline situation, except Madeline had a good enough grasp on how to manipulate him. And she admitted, she's like, I've always been scared of you, but I was able to kind of tame you because I was scared of you. Ashley's very out front scared of you. So, but it turns out like he defeated a super terrorist, well, super villain as he would phrase it. He kills one of them, but using his heat ray vision, and he ends up killing a guy. And now the video went viral, and he's like, oh, basically almost looking like, what are you getting so mad about? And it's like, okay. So he's just kind of, what are they so mad about? He's like, so what am I down? Like 1 or 2 points? It's like, no, 9.5. He's like, 9.5. God damn it. Why didn't you tell me? It's like, he's like, I'm going to make a statement and stuff like that. She's like, I don't think Mr. Edgar won. She's like, let's do, it's like, once again, this is what I brought up. It's just like Homelander just kind of doing his own thing. It's like getting mad at her. It's like, this is your fault. You caused this situation. So, I should also know, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it because it's in the back of my mind. I love when you break this episode down. There are literally 3 different actors from the TV show Timeless in this. None of them are in the same scene together, but they're scattered throughout the episode. So we got introduced to Alistair this episode. He's played by the actor who played Garcian Flynn in Timeless. There's the actress who plays Gia from Timeless. She's what is she, a senator? God, I'm blanking on her. Her first name's Victoria, but I'm trying to remember what her last name was. She was the one that was kind of talking about everything, when Homelander shows up. Like I said, we'll get to that. And also, Malcolm Barrett is back, because him as Seth, and I love, once again, I brought this up during season 1, I love that his name is Seth, and his writing partner, because they're the ones that kind of write the stories, and, they're kind of the PR people, too. Like, I love that dude's name's Evan, so it's kind of like how, like, the Seth Rogen and Evan, what's Evan's last name? It's something Gold, isn't it? It's like, it's not Goldberg. I'm blanking on it. But like, obviously, like, they're like a duo, like, I think writing partners and producing partners as well, like Seth and Evan. So I brought that up in season 1. It's just neat to see them back too. But I just immediately was like, holy crap, there were literally 3 Timeless actors from the TV show Timeless up here. Just, like I said, they're just in like 3 different scenes. And I just thought that was so interesting when you break that out. Regardless. But when Homelander was getting all uppity in Ashley's face about everything, Stormfront shows up. It's like, oh, do you want me to help out with that? Like, I'm always here to help if you want me to. Then there's the whole thing with, once again, it's just, I love how they like, because like you could tell it's just so cheesy and stuff like that. It's one of those things that like even if something's cheesy to you, you could tell they're going above and beyond to make it extra cheesy, like when they're filming this movie and everything. And it's just like, oh yeah, Stormfront, Maeve and Starlight together, like yeah, like you can tell they're making a point of it and stuff like that, you know. And obviously like Stormfront's noticing that like Annie's looking at her a lot. It's like, oh yeah, you're kind of standing me, aren't you? And she's kind of like, you know, but it's like Annie's got her eyes on you for different reasons, because it's like, oh, I know who you are and what you're capable of, you know. So I thought that was interesting. I also love who else shows up in that scene. It's Greg, was it Grunberg? I make sure to remember it, but I forgot. He's Matt from Heroes. I was like, dude, that's so crazy that you'd be here. That's nuts. I was like, holy shit, that's crazy. I also love that, like, it's like, all right, like, bring in the mutant monsters and people in Greek. Like I said, it's just like the behind the scenes of it and just like how cheesy it can be, like, out of context and stuff like that. I just thought that was kind of dope. But obviously it, you know, it also shows you like how pandering this is, like how that can be, like, you know, especially later on, because Maeve and Elaine are sitting down and you're just like, you know, Seth and Evan are pitching everything about like, oh, Maeve coming out, you know, oh, you know, not only are you a superhero, you're a symbol, hashtag brave Maeve. They had this picture of her with a flag, and they're like, and I love Elena's like, you do know that Maeve's bi. It's like, yeah, but we think if she's lesbian, it's a lot less confusing. And it's like, okay, like misidentifying. It's okay. We're once again, like, I think that's such an interesting thing. It's like, it's all about branding. It's like, oh, but you being lesbian, it's a lot simpler. It's bi. It's like, oh, it's, you know, that I think in itself speaks volumes. And, you know, it's just kind of like, because even like having Elena, she's like, why am I part of this? It's like, you know, and it's like, she's like, that's men's work. Because they're like, yeah, because a certain percentage of people are more okay with like a relationship with someone, basically in gay relationships where gender roles are established. So it's like, oh, you being the man of the relationship by dressing up like a man. And I was like, that's so interesting. And they're like, oh, like Ellen and Portia, which once again, this was filmed a while back, but it's just kind of like, and it's not necessarily, it's just interesting hearing Ellen's name come up and you're like, oh, that's a little awkward. A little awkward now. And just all that stuff, but still. And Elena's just kind of like, oh, I don't want to have any part of this. She's like, I'm actually going to leave, but like, Maeve's like, no, you can't leave. I need you to be here so that I can keep an eye on you. You know, it's the only way I can protect you, because obviously Maeve's like, if you're out of my eyesight, like Homelander will find you. He will find you wherever you go. I mean, he has Vaught's, you know, connections, but also he's the sociopath that he is, so he will track you down regardless, just make it his own personal mission. So for her, it's like, stay here and I'll protect you. It's like, well, what do? We're going to take that motherfucker down. I'm like, okay. So that's interesting. So many people obviously at odds with Homelander, because obviously like the 7 is a mess right now, because obviously you have Starlight being against Homelander and just everything that Vought and the 7 stand for. You have A-Train having his own issues, because it's like, oh, you want to kick me out of the 7. Obviously he having to read that script and everything, but obviously he's kind of like, oh, I got my own rewrites. He's like, how about we cut out the monologue at the end? It's like, keep it super vague whether or not I'm really in or out. And the dude's like, no, we're doing this. It's like, you will have a problem, A-Train, take it up with Ashley. This is above my pay grade, you know? So it was interesting, because like for one moment, and you know, A-Train's like, I'm not going to do it. The dude's back was turned. He had this look like, motherfucker. Like, it's just, he's all been smiles, like, hey, let's do this, baby, A-Train. Like, you know, he was all that, but now it's just kind of like almost a moment of just kind of the mask coming down, like, dude, this is my damn job. Do not make this difficult for me. Let's get this shit done. You're almost kind of like, you're not that special. He doesn't go into that, but it makes me immediately think that. But, obviously, like, A-Train talks to Ashley about it, and Ashley's basically like, no. He's like, just let me talk to Homelander about it. She's like, okay, we can do one of two things. Either you could do the script and you could bow out gracefully, or you could get fired because, you know, this is all your fault for shooting up Compound V and giving yourself a weak heart. So what do you want to do with this? And so it seems like he reluctantly, you know, does his thing. And the moment he's doing his scene, I was like, that's not even Homelander. That's a stand-in, isn't it? And it turns out to be a good stand-in. I was like, yeah, I think it would be so funny if that was actually like their Homelander stunt double that they use. I think that actually, I mean, to be fair, I think that happens. I'm not well versed in everything movie magic wise, but over the shoulder shot, sometimes you might not actually get the actor, maybe they're not there that day, or makes you wonder that I said home front, Jesus. I was combined Stormfront and Homelander. I'll get to that. But I think because he's probably like, I don't want to do the movie, get someone else to do it. But I think it'd be interesting. You only need the actor on set when you're actually doing like face shots, when you're showing their face and everything. Beyond that, you don't really need them on set like all the time. So it makes sense. But it's just kind of like he had that powerful moment, and dude was like, oh, do you want to take it again? He was like, nah, you can move on. Dude was like, all right, let's move on. So try once again that thing of people acting like, oh, we care, you want to do that again? It was like, oh, that was beautiful, that was so moving. All right, places people, let's move on. So it's just kind of like, all right, now he's out of the 7 and everything. So then you have the whole situation of Homelander going, because obviously Victoria's got that rally, a whole bunch of people are gathered around, and Homelander drops in, and you can see the look on her face like, oh shit. Like, he's like, can I get that? And she hands him the mic. He's like, hey guys, I understand why you're worried, you're concerned. He's like, no innocent people should die, but he's almost like, these kind of things happen. Someone in the crowd was like, wait, this has happened more than once? So he's letting it slip. It's like he's doing a terrible job because he wanted to kind of handle things on. He's like, I don't need anyone. I can do this on my own. And he's failing miserably. The entire crowd turns against him, because at one point there was a soldier out front being like, you don't speak for me when it comes to all of this, you killing some innocent person, because obviously we as the audience, obviously the boys, obviously a lot of people know that there's a lot of collateral damage that gets covered up by VIDS. So obviously that's not something the public knows, but this is kind of a peek into that window. But I thought was so interesting is, like, he was looking so annoyed, and then he lasers the dude, and the moment he's killing the entire crowd, I'm like, this is in his head, and it turns out to be in his head. But it also shows you, like, how the fact is he was thinking about it, he wanted to do it, and how easy it would be to literally massacre that entire crowd. Because, once again, this is your Superman of this world, just being able to be like, oh, like, if you piss me off, I could just kill you all in literally seconds, and that's like the scary thing about it. And obviously he's like, you guys are real heroes, and he bounces and leaves. So that was a miserable failure. And then he's in the hallway just kind of laughing because everything that's posted up about it, he's just like, he's frustrated because he's just kind of like, he's like, no, I could do it. I thought I could do it. Because someone had actually hit me up. They were like, they didn't know how, they didn't believe Homelander was going to last as long as he would about this whole, I don't need anyone. It's like, eventually he would need people's love and everything. And he does. And because obviously for him, it's like, I think it's more so like, I don't know if he necessarily wants the people's love, but the fact of the matter is that, it's so easily turned around. Like, I think it's just like, damn it, this was my chance to kind of have full control. And the moment I had full control, I was supposed to be able to do this. I couldn't do it. I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, I need these people's love. Oh, they hate me. It's like, it's the perception. And for him, feel like he's losing his grip, that power he has over people. It's not about love. I mean, it is, but more so for him, it's the power of like, oh, I can sway so many people. I think that's what really frustrated him about the whole situation. So we have that. At the same time, there's the whole, the deep situation, obviously, doing the press run of like, ha ha ha, I'm married. Oh my God. It's like, yeah. And, they're doing an interview with Katie Couric, and she's like, about the Deep's past and everything. It's like, no. He has a complicated past, but he's a good soul. She would know because, I make her breakfast in bed. And it's like, all right, so obviously leaning into it, and that PSA was amazing. And it's just like, I'm here to fight injustice, and that dude's making moves on the lady, and then the Deep is like, hey man, that's not cool. And it's just like the lamest thing, and I love it because he's lame. He's, and so the fact of the matter is, there's also the next one of those kids are fighting. He's like, hey guys, cut it. And it's just like the most cheesy thing. But like I said, we also got to meet Alistair and everything, so once again, I'm trying to figure out like what they want. It's actually interesting because like A-Train was watching the video, and Stormfront was like, yeah, it's kind of, because he was like, this is bullshit. She's like, it wasn't always. They used to actually kind of stand for something. He's like, how would you know? She actually used to be part of church. I figured as much. Like the way that and I brought it up before. when the Seven ran into the deep in episode 3, she was the only one that immediately knew, like, oh, you're from like you joined the Church of the Collective. And it's like, the fact that she was the only one who's able to jump to that meant she was either against them or was a part of them. And it seems like it's a combination of two. She used to be a part of it, but what it used to represent, kind of like how it was pure and everything. And I'm like, oh, wait, where are we? And she's like, oh, they let certain people in, people who aren't worthy. Like, I'm butchering it, but she was basically saying like, people who aren't good enough, people who are garbage. And it's like, what are you trying to say? And she's like, oh, like, she just like, she's like, she's trying to keep her low-key racism. And I thought that was so interesting, because it's like, she had never said anything before now, but the fact is she's a lot more comfortable. I guess it's because it's a one-on-one and no one else is around, so she has to keep up her front. But it's just like she keeps it real with A-Train of like, okay, like, and it's like, oh, so now you realize one of your former fellow Sevens is super racist. So that ended up being kind of a nasty situation on its own. But I'm like, okay, so where's that going to go? Then kind of circling back, because we're all talking about the deep and everything, him meeting Maeve, showing up, being like, hey, she's like, yeah, like, basically, you know, these people, you know, it's like, because he's handing out books, and she's like, I thought you were that lady, the old lady's like, I thought you guys were serving food. He's like, oh no, but this is food for the soul. You're like, oh Jesus. But the fact is, Maeve's like, hey, he's like, oh my God. And she's like, you really want to get back into Seven and stuff like that. Like, the fact of the matter is, you need a woman like me to basically say that you aren't such a piece of shit. He's like, wait, you think I'm a piece of shit? She's like, oh, fuck yeah. So it's like, you help me, I'll help you. And it's like, so she's going to be getting the Deep's help or taking down Homelander. But it's like, will he be willing to do that though? Because maybe helping you might be counterintuitive to what the Collective wants. Or maybe the fact is, you're getting Maeve helping you, they might look at that as like, well, it's a win, because this would be an easier way to slide you back into the Seven if you help her. So they might be more willing, or they might end up choosing more on the Homelander side of things, because once again, it also depends on where they lie on this whole thing. Like, how do they feel about, you know, Maeve being bi, or as the public will say, gay, you know, like, how would they feel about that? Could they be like, maybe it doesn't align with our virtues, which maybe that's what, so I wonder, is that supposed to represent the fact is that maybe once upon a time the Church of Collective was super borderlining KKK-ish, maybe, I don't know, you know, but maybe it's changed a lot, I don't know, maybe not. Well, I mean, because, like, Eagle is a part of it, so maybe once upon a time when Stormfront was a part of it, I mean, whatever the case may be, I'm interested to find out, like, how it was different back then. But at the same time, you know, there's the whole situation with Homelander turning to Stormfront for help, and obviously she's got her people on it. She mentioned someone specifically, and it's like, oh yeah, that's my meme queen. The fact is, doing the meme thing again could change perspective, can change public perception. And he's like, oh, later on, he's like, oh, I'm up like 5 points. So it's like a lot of what she was able to do actually did help in the long run, you know? I should also circle back, because I'd actually forgot to talk about that scene between Stormfront, Annie, and her mom, because her mom is there, and she's like, what? Because she sees Stormfront talking to her mom. And it's like, Stormfront, it's like, oh, like, Mom, don't be talking to strangers about, like, our issues and stuff like this. She's like, but, like, you know, she's not a stranger. This is one of your teammates and everything. And obviously, like, Annie knows what she knows. And it's like, this lady's not a good person. So it's kind of like, let's talk about our stuff in private. But then it's just, you know, it's basically like Stormfront being like, oh, you should forgive your mom, because it's just kind of like, you know, this whole, you know, Compound V thing has hit a lot of people. You know, the truth is out there, and the fact of the matter is, you know, her mom being like, I am sorry, you know, all the problems I caused for you. She's just kind of like, I missed you, and, you know, you didn't really, you know, answer my text. But obviously, like, Annie is still pissed at her, but for her, I think it's like, I'm working on so much more right now. Already got too much on my plate right now with this whole Stormfront situation / Liberty situation, plus the whole VOT thing. But also, I think there is still the part of her that's like, I can't quite forgive you for doing what you did. Because even she tried to be like, you know, but it turns out I wasn't the only one who did it. Like, there are a lot of people who did, you know, that gave, you know, Compound V to their kids. But then it's like, you know, Stormfront kind of is sly about like bringing up the subject of someone leaking it, and then she's kind of looking at Annie, and you're like, she knows it's her, doesn't she? And she kind of throws it in Annie's face later on because Annie, is typing, like sneaking into her room later on in her trailer or whatever, and goes to her computer, and there's like a whole bunch of emails, and I'm like, what's this all about? Like, a certain name, it was like Sage something, kept coming up. I'm like, is that like a location? Like, are these like incident reports of like, people covering up stuff that she's done in the past? Once again, we don't fully know the scope of everything, but obviously Stormfront comes back in, and it's like, and she's just like, and Annie's laying into it like, you have no right to kind of get between me and my mom about her business. She's like, oh wow. She's like, look at you, like putting on such a performance. Like, oh my God, you're so good. But it's like, oh, I know what's up. I know you're the one who leaked everything. And then it's kind of like, you don't want me to let that be known to the others. And it's like, well, do you want the world to know about you being Liberty? She's like, look at you. And she says a line I thought was so fascinating. She's like, I could basically, you're going to help be a big help for me in the future. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, because now that, like, Annie's mom is in the picture, part of me is like, Stormfront's going to use her against you later on at some point. Like, you're going to have to do something, and she's going to threaten to kill your mom if you don't do it. I just get that feeling, because we know Stormfront, not above, I wouldn't put her above doing that, but it's a thing of, like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, you're going to help me? It's like, are you going to use her as a means of to benefit you in some shape or form? And like, is it something related to VOD? Is it just a personal thing? Well, once again, and other people have thought this up too. Like, what I keep bringing up of why I'm confused why she's able to do what she's able to do, basically talk mad shit about VOD. But then, like, obviously Edgar had picked you for the team, so it's like, why is it? Especially considering all that VOD does to like hide your identity. It's like, it's got to be a long game. Once again, we're playing 3D chess here. It's like there are a couple moves ahead of everybody. So it's like, it has to be a thing of like, to have such an outspoken person amongst the seven so you can turn things around. Like, because she seems like she's leading the charge in one direction while she's actually secretly like, oh, I'm actually working VOD. Like, I think it's like she's leading this charge on one front, but like it's all going to circle back to go back under the umbrella of VOD. It's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, it's going to swing back around to be in VOD's favor, I think. Or maybe like this is meant to be burning the ground of VOD just to rebuild it and rise it from the ashes. I don't know. Well, what's also interesting though is because I was watching something, what was it? Oh yeah, John Roca had because I watched a tiny bit. I had to circle back to it, but obviously there's spoiler review of like the first 4 episodes, and they brought up like Sean Ashmore being there. It's like, oh, I didn't know he was going to be in this, and lo and behold, he pops up this episode. I thought that was interesting. I didn't know he was going to be in this, but which is interesting too because obviously to this superhero thing, like he's connected because obviously he was in the X-Men movies. But regardless, God, I lost my train of thought. Is this the first thing I'm seeing him pop up in post Killjoys? I think this might be. Or is that, no, that's Aaron. Or is it Sean? No, Aaron's the one that's in Killjoys. But she's like, oh yeah, like you can do it, nothing in life comes without sacrifice. Because he's like, oh yeah, but he's like a 17-year-old kid. I have to look him in the face. And she's like, don't worry, just know that the sacrifice is necessary. And then, he's a hero. Just can you keep that in mind? He's like, sure. So part of me is like, is that her brother or something? Or maybe it's like could we know she's older than what she is? So you're like, could that actually be like her son or grandson type of thing? I don't know. But, regardless of all of that, I'm like, what is that about? What is that setting up? He's a nurse or whatever. So is it like a thing of like, is that kind of like, are we getting, I'm just randomly thinking here. I was like, is that supposed to be like, oh man, there's this kid that's sick? I just thought about it. I was like, didn't I see him something else fairly recently? I was like, it was Lock and Key, right? Yeah, because he's the uncle in Lock and Key, if I remember correctly. Or is that Aaron? No, I'm fairly sure that's Sean. Regardless, I guess I was like, I knew there was something more recently I've seen him in. But I'm curious what that, like, I was wondering, is it going to be like a, what's that term for, like, mercy, angels of death? Is that what they're called? Like, like nurses or doctors who kill their patients because they think it's merciful. Like, is that what that is, or is that just kind of like, oh man, I have this hard thing of like, this kid is sick or dying and I have to be there, like it's a hard thing, like. So I'm curious, like, what that connection is in that regard, what that storyline is. But also on top of what I brought up before too, is the thing of. But then also there's the Homelander and Stormfront thing. Let's finally get to that. Because he was like, oh, I owe you and everything. And she's like, well, basically pay me back. And I'm like, well, in what way? And then they start making out. And I'm like, okay. Because I was literally listening to someone. Because I was listening to the, because this is one of those few shows, like, I like hearing other people's thoughts about it. So this is one of those shows I will literally go out of my way to listen to other people's discussions. And so I was listening to the Nerd Soup. And they were discussing... someone had suggested that these two were going to bang, and literally after the hearing, I think literally it was the most recent episode, a spoiler discussion about the most recent episode, and lo and behold, this next episode, they're banging, and it's like they're slamming each other. It's like, oh, this is like rough superhero sex. And then she's like, go ahead, laser me right here. She's like, go ahead, I know you want to. And he does it a little bit, and she's like, come on, laser my tits. And he does it harder, and she's like, oh, it hurts so. And he stops. She's like, what are you doing? Keep going. And it's just like, this is sadistic and twisted. This is kinky superhero sex. Because it's interesting, I think it's actually kind of like, the only time I've ever seen this kind of brought up in a show is like Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, because like they kind of get to it a little bit, like, oh, their sex is a little rough because he's worried like I might hurt her, but it's like, no, like I'm, you're not the only one with superpowers. I got powers too. But obviously this goes to another extreme. They're slamming each other around, put like superhuman strength and everything, and they're just like banging all over the place. It's wild. And it's like, okay, so now literally the most despicable human beings in this series have hooked up, and it's like, that's a terrifying situation. Like, I mean, but it makes you wonder, like, what is Stormfront up to? Because there's a part of me wondering, like, because obviously for Edgar, it'd work out if they could pacify Homelander and keep him like a little, like, once again, it's like by her being like, oh, I'm off doing my thing, and Homelander and her hooking up and her kind of being like, oh, like, I got you, I got your back, I'm in this with you. Because in his mind, it's like, oh, you're very F-bot, and he's very kind of when he's standing on his own. So now it's like, oh, we're kindred spirits. But it's like, once again, I think it's all going to circle back around to her be like, oh yeah, I've been Edgar's like right hand this entire time. I was here to pacify you, to make sure you don't, to keep you reined in. That's what I'm kind of wondering, is that why she's kind of letting their situation. I mean, who knows? Like, obviously, like, once again, Homelander's in that like effed up spot where mentally, where he's just looking for someone to latch on to. The one person he could latch on to, Madeline, that didn't work anymore because she was all about lies. Stormfront kind of tells him like it is, but obviously like that might be the greatest lie of it all. So I'm curious to see kind of how this all kind of turns around. We'll have to wait and see. Dude, I cannot wait to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, we'll let you to force and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.